The topic was planning for the future, and I'm Josh.
I'm Erin.
And the whole reason why we kind of wanted to do this because we figured that there's a lot of things that middle schoolers kind of need to know before they can move on to the next level, and they should know for like right now. So we kind of thought of the different skills and things that would be useful for them to use going on in the future. So that was kind of the whole thing. We just kind of wanted to prepare them as best as we could during this advisory. Lesson 1 is kind of like the introduction lesson, I guess you'd say. And kind of the main objective of that lesson is to just get everybody on the same page and get everybody kind of working together and, opening up with one another, because many times you're not going to have a classroom that's everyone's friendly and getting along with everybody, and maybe they don't even know everybody in the classroom. Maybe you have a transfer student or something like that. So we decided that we should do like an icebreaker and like an introduction activity, and the activity we chose to do was we called it foam ball favorites. I mean, you can name it anything you want. It's where maybe you have like a bowl of M&Ms or like poker chips or something like that. Just something that has a color, or marbles, and then each marble has like a category, like maybe your favorite sport or favorite activity to do outside of school, favorite color, things like that. It could be anything you want. And the student just picks one to choose, like to talk about, and they go around, they introduce themselves, and then they just go like that, and then they pass the foam ball back to somebody else, and they kind of go like that, and that's how they introduce themselves to everybody else. And it's just a great way to like kind of build camaraderie and learn each other's names if you don't know it, and it's also a great way for the teacher to learn some things about students. So that's how we started it. The second lesson is we focus on communication skills, and we're actually going to do this activity with you later. But the objective for that is that students successfully communicate with a partner in an appropriate and accurate manner. Oftentimes, students they don't use like the proper or appropriate communication skills with one another. So we decided to do the activity. We called it partner shape activity, where you pair them off into twos, and one student gets a shape and they have to look at it, and they have to give the directions to the other student who's not looking at it. So you kind of have to ask questions, and you draw the shape without having to be able to see it. And then after that, we'll kind of go into like I messages and you messages, and how you want to kind of talk and handle situations and conflict with friends and peers and things like that. The third lesson was problem solving, and the whole objective is that to kind of get students thinking about situations and conflicts. So kind of building off the end of the communication lesson, we're going into problem solving, so how they can work to figure out solutions to problems and things like that. So the activity that we had was the students working in groups to address problems that are assigned to them. So maybe you give them something, and the prompt would be like, what is a friend asked to cheat on your test, or something like that. Something that's like relatable to them. And before you can do both, like before you set them off into groups, you kind of give an example. And the example we talked about was the tsunami and earthquake in Japan. Kind of get them talking about that and solutions, and how they would feel if they were, going to school there, and maybe what we can do to help them out or something like that. Just kind of get them about thinking of problems, and it's just a great way bringing Japanese culture into it and their situation, because it gets them thinking about like problems that are going on in the world, and not just being so focused on themselves. Just kind of gets them outside of thinking about themselves and just focusing on other things. And the fourth one we did was like a financial skill thing. A lot of students, money isn't really something they're really concerned about right now, but this is more of like a future one, because they're going to be, we focus it for like 8th grade class, so they're going to be soon like working and getting jobs and things like that. So I figured we talk about how to handle your money and things like that. An activity we had was them actually looking at like a pay stub and figuring it out, things like that. And they can like write checks and like send checks, and just kind of working together to kind of figure out things related towards money, so they can figure out the best ways to spend it, and the rights and the wrongs, the do's and the don'ts, things like that. And lesson 5 was citizenship, and the kind of whole objective was that is just kind of figure out what makes a good citizen. So we had the students kind of brainstorm ideas of what they consider to be a good citizen in the community, and the examples of like firemen and things like that. They just give their examples, and then we have the students create their own individual posters that they would put like their own rules and regulations of what they feel they should strive to be and maybe characteristics. And then you can have them make the poster with markers or whatever, and then you hang it up in class so it's something that they look at every day so that they're like reminded of, you know, this is how I should act. So it's good for the classroom, like environment and behavior thing, but it's also a reminder to them of how they can be successful and a good citizen.
Okay, so the first week, we really kind of focusing on planning for the future. Like these are like citizenship and payroll and stuff like that. That's farther off in the future. Those are skills that are going to be used. But the second week, we really focused on skills that they need to succeed in the future, but they can apply in their lives immediately, and that will help them to succeed more in the future if they use them. So the first day we did stress and time management, and we started off with talking about like the have-tos and the want-tos of life. A lot of time middle school students, they'll say, well, I have to go home and play video games. Well, no, and that's what we'll get into this discussion of what really is important and what they want to do. So talking about priorities and things like that. And then the first activity that we'll do is they'll just select the day that they think is busiest out of their week, and they'll write down all the activities that they do, from sleeping and from when they wake up in the morning to when they go to bed at night, and they'll write how long they spend on each activity. So that'll kind of give them a visual to see, this is where all my time is going, and they may be doing some activities they don't realize how much time it consumes. And so if it's playing games on the internet or anything like that. And then they'll apply that, and together as a class we'll make daily schedules. So they've looked at the time, how much time it takes, but they'll put time limits on it. So from 7 to 7:15 they'll eat breakfast every morning and things like that. And then after the daily schedule is made, their homework will be to make a weekly schedule. And so this will really help them to plan out their time, see when they have time to do homework, and hopefully help them to put the have-tos first, the homework and responsibilities at home and all that stuff, and then the want-tos, see where they might fit in the schedule. The next day, we'll talk about study skills. As they go on through high school and if they go to college, obviously they're going to have to be taking a lot of tests. And a lot of times, teachers give tests, and they might give study guides, but they don't really help them to prepare. So we'll go over some of the tips for studying. We'll just start it off with a discussion of how do they prepare for tests, and allow students to see that there are a variety of ways. There will probably be some people who say that they don't prepare at all. So we'll get into that discussion about study habits. And so we'll go over some of the key points. We'll talk about questions that you should ask the teacher before you go home to study. So what you really need to know for the test. Just different ways to go over the information, the different types of study materials that you can make. And then as a class, we'll go through and we'll make study materials. So we can make flashcards, outlines, timelines, practice quizzes for yourself. So they'll learn how to make those study materials so that when they go home and study for their tests, they can do that. The next day, we'll apply we went from studying now to actually taking that test. Standardized testing obviously is a huge thing, as well as testing in classes in general. So they need to know how to take a test if they really want to succeed and move forward for their future. So we started out I made up just a really general quiz over the subjects that they'd be taking in 8th grade, and they'd have to take the quiz. It was only a 5-question quiz, but each question emphasized a different, there were different points kind of hidden in the questions so that we can talk about it later. So there were multiple choice, fill in the blank, short answer, as well as directions on there. And it was one of those things that a lot of students don't bother to read the directions. So in the directions at the very end, some teachers have done this before, where they say you only have to answer the odd number questions. So that will be a test right there, and it'll hopefully show students that it really is important to read the directions, because you can guarantee that there's a student in the class who didn't bother to read all the directions and answered all of the questions instead. But then we'll talk about how you can work through multiple choice questions to try to answer your best on short answer questions, even if you don't know the whole answer, just to answer what you can and things like that. And then we'll get a chance to retake the quiz with this new knowledge and see if they improve on their score. For day 9, we did, because these are 8th grade students and they're starting, just starting to think about their future. So we are going to bring in a high school freshman, a high school senior, and a college freshman just to talk to the students, because the teachers can tell the students what to expect, but it's not the same thing, because time changes, and when we get into those schools, we're going to seem old to them. So bring them in. The students can talk about their experiences, what they felt, what they wish they had known when they went into high school or when they went into college, what they think that those students should start working on. And hopefully it will really make an impact on the students. They'll have a chance to ask questions themselves. And so really, hopefully they'll get information and really start to think, okay, this is what I need to do before I go to college or high school or whatever their next step is. And then our last day, as we've been talking about planning for the future, getting ready for the future, is just to set them some goals for themselves. There is an interest surveys, they have a bunch of different ones online, to just start thinking about careers. What it is that they're interested in, what they're willing to do, whether they're willing to work outside, work at the desk, what kind of hours, things like that, and that will help them to focus what it is that they think they want to do. And then we can have a discussion as a class about the different careers. And some may know more about what career that they want to do. Some may know really details about certain careers that other students want to go into. So it'll just be a chance to share information. And then at the end, they'll just write goals for themselves for the next 5 years, where they want to be in 5 years, 10 years, and then 15 years. And for our assessment, we just really did a reflective thing where they would reflect back on the skills that we just went over in the last 2 weeks. What do you think they'll be able to use then? What will you use in the future? Was there anything that you wish that we had talked about that we didn't? Those kind of things like that, and then they'll hand that in.
Describe the shape to the person without letting them see it. And the person should draw it as best as you can, just based on the definitions.